Hi, I'm Jeff Clapes, the Traveling Librarian from BB Library, with a short armchair travel presentation on a beautiful corner of Greece. Last fall, I spent some time taking Greek language classes in an idyllic spot in the southern Peloponnese. The Peloponnese is named for the island of Pelops. Pelops was an ancient figure whose father, Tantalus, was the founder of the House of Atreus, a dysfunctional family if there ever was one. The Peloponnese is also known as the Despotate of Morea, which is the term that it was known by in the Middle Ages, and it's a term that's sometimes used today. It's divided into a number of historical and administrative regions, and we're going to look at the southernmost, which is called Laconia. The Peloponnese is very rugged and mountainous. There's only about 1 million people, 10% of the country's population, but it has an outsized position in the history of Greece, from ancient times to 1821, when it was the cradle of modern Greek independence. It's mostly off the beaten path for travelers, except for a few of the sites that are close to Athens for day trips. The whole region of Laconia only has about 90,000 people, and about a quarter of them live in Sparta, which is the capital. It's dominated by two mountain ranges, the Taygetos on the west, which rises to about 8,000 feet, and the Parmenas range on the east, which is about 6,000 feet. And in between, there's a beautiful valley watered by the Evrotas River, which is rich in olive and orange groves. I stayed for 2 weeks in Monemvasia, which is known as the Gibraltar of Greece, off the east coast. It's a rock about 300 meters high, and it's connected by a causeway to the mainland. It's called Monemvasia by the locals, it's called Monemvasia by the Byzantines, and Monemvasia by most modern Greeks, but all three pronunciations are considered perfectly fine. It has a tiny population, only about 50 people live on the rock itself. Most of the people live on the mainland in the town called Yefira, which means bridge in Greek. The mostly barren rock has a small Byzantine fortified town, which you can see over on the right, nestled under the cliffs. The upper plateau used to have a much larger town and fortifications, but now most of it is ruined. The town is completely pedestrianized. You have to leave your car outside because most of the streets are only a few feet wide and very rocky and full of steps and stairways. So mostly the only thing that you will see other than pedestrians are donkeys and wheelbarrows. The town gets its name, Monemvasia, from the Old Greek for one entrance, because there used to be only one way to get into the town. This is a view looking from the highest point on the rock, about 900 feet up, back towards the town of Yefira on the mainland. The current causeway that leads to the island was not built until the late 19th century, and now it's an easy way to get to the island. You can actually drive out onto the causeway, and there's parking right at the base of the cliffs. This is the main west gate, which has a dogleg jog in it that added protection from invaders and made it harder for people to get into the city. The town itself was founded in the year 783, and it withstood numerous attacks over the years from the Normans, the Arabs, the Ottomans. It was eventually taken by the Franks in the 13th century, although for several decades it was the only part of the Peloponnese that resisted them. It went back and forth between the Ottomans and the Venetians and the Franks, like other parts of the Peloponnese, until Greek independence in the early 19th century. This is Pablito House, which is where I stayed for a couple of weeks. It's an 11th century building that's been restored as a guest house. And for most of the 2 weeks that I was there, I was the only person in it. This is the back street entrance to my room and the view from my balcony out over the ocean. One of the wonderful things about staying in Greece is the food. This is breakfast in a local cafe where a woman named Irini made my breakfast every morning with local ingredients: eggs, cheese, orange juice, tomatoes, fresh coffee, fruit, Greek yogurt, and granola. And I had company for breakfast. This is the population of local cats that's sitting in the sun in the early morning. Here's a ruined church in my neighborhood. Monemvasia used to have about 40 churches in the lower town alone, but now only 4 remain in good restored condition. Most of the rest of them are in ruins. The town is very easy to get lost in, but it's not big. And as I said, there's lots of stairs and slopes, and it's enjoyable to get lost in. And as you walk around, you can see beautiful houses, some of which have been restored, and some of which are still in ruins. One of the biggest churches in town is the Church of Panagia Chrysafitisa, which dates back to the first Turkish period in the 1500s. It faces what is now the biggest square in the lower town, right next to the ocean. The seawalls protect the town on the south side, and there's only one small gate, Portello, and you can see here where it opens onto a little platform where you can go swimming off the rocks. This is a good illustration of buildings that have been renovated and those that haven't. The one on the left has been restored. Construction costs are very high, partly because of the prime tourist location and partly because of the difficulty of getting materials in and out of the town. This narrow little stairway is actually a street that connects one plaza to another higher up around the corner. Just outside the walls of the town is a small cemetery that's halfway up the hillside and looking out over the ocean. Yanis Ritsos, whose tomb you can see here, is one of the most famous people from the town. He lived from 1909 to 1990. He was a left-wing poet and writer and was active in the Greek resistance during World War II. He's one of Greece's best-known 20th century poets and was considered for a Nobel Prize, but the right-wing government would not allow his nomination. But he still remains famous for Greeks today. This is his home, which is just inside the gates of the town, and you can see a bust of him just outside the front door. This is the twilight view from my balcony, and just below is the church of Ios Nikolaos, which was built in the 1700s. That time of day is beautiful on Monovasia because most of the tourists have gone and you have the place to yourself. Here you can see, way up on the cliffside, there's a tiny chapel, which is officially known as the Church of the Holy Apostles. It was built around the 1690s, but it is only about 10 feet long. It's a small alcove that's actually carved into the cliff. Here's the view from the doorway looking back out over the town. And you can see this is the entirety of the chapel inside. It's a beautiful place to sit at the end of the day, climb up the cliff, and just look out over the town. You can see a sign up in the corner of this slide that shows the word polite, which means for sale. And if you want a fixer-upper, there are an awful lot of properties in Monemvasia. Here's one that I wanted to buy, but it looked like someone had already purchased it and was starting to work on it. The interior shows that they have a long way to go. This is a view looking down from the cliffs over the main square. The main cathedral is the Church of Christ Elkomenos, which means in chains. He was the patron saint of the town, and it was built over a fairly long period. Parts of it date all the way back to the 11th and 12th centuries, but the current building is mostly from 1697. It has a beautiful 14th century iconostasis and also a separate bell tower that you can see in the front that dates from the 18th century. The old bishop's residence is just to the right, and the domed building even further to the right is a 16th century mosque from when the Ottomans were there, but it is now used as a small and very good museum about the history of the town. Here I am with my teacher Andreas. If you ever want to take language classes, this is definitely the way to do it. And here is the main street, such as it is, which is full of shops and tavernas. And here's my guest house owner and a friend of his who runs a store that sells local products like soaps and olive oils and honey, and so forth. While I was there, I ate in one of two restaurants that were open. This was off-season, so a lot of the places were closed. And I frequented the two restaurants every night to get nice, wonderful, home-cooked meals. If you go onto the mainland, you can hike up into the hills and get a good view out over the island just off the coast. And from the mainland, you can see that the lower town is actually completely hidden from view. It's tucked around the corner, which makes it even more secure because it's pretty much invisible from attackers. Up on the cliffs, you can get a good view down over the town and see some of these beautiful streets. These are some examples of the architecture of the area. And here is the Church of Panagia Myrtidiotisa, which was built around 1700, another of the main churches that's been restored. And here again is the main square with the bell tower. The carvings over the door of the cathedral are, interestingly, of two peacocks standing apparently on crocodiles. I was not able to figure out what the symbolism meant. And here's an example of a beautiful taverna where you can have your ouzo in the afternoon, looking out over the Aegean. It's possible to walk all the way around the island down at the base. If you exit the eastern gate, you come upon a recently built lighthouse, which you can see here, that's now used by the Greek Coast Guard. The hiking trail goes all the way around the base of the rock, although very few people actually bother to do this. But it's worth it because you get a very different view of the island. At night, again, you pretty much have the place to yourself, particularly in the off-season, which was when I was there. In November, the temperature is still quite good. You can even swim in the ocean. The weather is beautiful and dry. The temperatures don't get very hot. Here's a view at night of the east wall that has a gate that goes out to that lighthouse. They recently finished a major restoration and lighting project to restore that part of the city. And here's an example of a house that has a sculpture of the Lion of St. Mark, which shows the Venetian influence. The Venetians were influential in Monemvasia for a very long time. You can look up to the upper town. This is a view from my balcony. And if you hike up there, there are tremendous views. Here you can look down to the roundabout that's at the main entrance gate. You can see the parking along the road. And note in this slide the ramps for wheeled carts, which are really the only way for people to get supplies in and out of the town, even today. This was a particularly stormy day that turned the island into gave it a kind of haunted effect. And here's a good view looking east to the entrance stairway, which goes up to the upper town. You can see off in the distance that cliffside chapel that we saw earlier. The stairway on the left is a fortified entrance that goes up to the castle. Here you can see a view looking down. It twists back and forth and goes through several gates up to a bastion at the top. The main gate and garrison of the upper town has recently been restored, along with this once ruined church, another restoration project that has been going on for several years. The upper town was once as densely built and populated as the lower town, and in fact it was quite a bit larger, but except for a handful of buildings, it is now almost completely in ruins and has a real feel of isolation. I can read to you a brief poem from the poet who I mentioned earlier, Yannis Ritsos, who wrote about this part of Monemvasia. He said, "This landscape is as harsh as silence. It hugs to its breast the scorching stones, clasps in the light its orphaned olive trees and vineyards, clenches its teeth. There is no water, light only. Roads vanish in light, and the shadow of the sheepfold is made of iron." The main site, and the most beautiful in the whole town, is up on the top, known as the Church of Hagia Sophia. It's a Byzantine church that was built in the 12th century. The big entrance portico that you can see on the right was later built by the Venetians, and it's perched right on the edge of a cliff. All you can hear up here is the sound of wind, and it's just an incredibly moving place to be. Here you can see how vertiginously it stands right at the edge of a several hundred-foot cliff. Inside there are fragments of the original frescoes, as well as some more recent decorations. It was used at one point as a mosque under Ottoman rule, and here you can see the mihrab, which faces Mecca, still in the wall, as well as some Byzantine-era sculptures. Also, there's quite a few sections of the original fortification walls that go all around the cliffs, and you can walk along those for wonderful views. There's a large public cistern that was built on this slope on the top that would have gathered rainfall, given how little water there was on the island, and it would have guided the water down this slope into an underground storage tank, which you can still see down at the bottom. Water was very scarce on Monemvasia, and almost every building had its own underground cistern, even private homes. At the very highest point, about 900 feet up, is the citadel. This is one corner of it. This was also built in the Byzantine period. It was square and had a tower at each corner, but now it's pretty much in ruins. But the view is spectacular from the high point of the rock. The domed building below the cistern was a Turkish-era public fountain. And here you can see a view down over the entrance gate to the city, down in the lower town. And over on the left-hand side is my guest house, and the church immediately below it. Here are some views looking down to the lower town, and also a couple of views of the ramparts. There's also, as you can see, some beautiful wildflowers. These are fall cyclamens, which are also accompanied by fall crocuses that are all over the upper town at this time of year. This is a view down over what was originally the ruined residential area of the city, and a sentry tower that you can see at the east end, as well as a view down to the lighthouse that we passed earlier. Here you can see in that residential area a number of private dwellings, and the arches have cisterns that are visible underneath them. There's a number of foundations of private homes in this area, as well as 2 homes remaining from wealthy nobles that have been partly reconstructed as part of another archaeological project. And finally, what's known as the Mura Rossa, or Red Wall in Italian, which was built to protect the north face by the Turks, and it's so called because of the slightly reddish color of the mortar. And here's a view looking down to it. And the sun setting as we look out over the Aegean Sea. If you'd like to learn more about Greece, I'll be doing 2 traveling librarian programs at BB Library this summer, both on the northern Greek mainland. First, on Tuesday, July 18th at 7 p.m., we'll visit Thessaloniki, which is Greece's cosmopolitan second city, as well as the region of Macedonia, home to the Empire of Alexander the Great. And next, on Tuesday, August 8th, also at 7 p.m., we'll visit the monasteries of Meteora and the mountainous region of central Greece. And I hope to see you there. Thank you.